Pro-life talk. Real world answers. This is Life Report.
Welcome to Life Report. I'm your host, Josh Brom, and I'm here with my special friends, Monica and Ellen from Secular Pro-Life. I'm so glad to finally have people from Secular Pro-Life on the show.
Us too.
So Monica and Ellen and I became friends a few months ago. I mean, I already knew about Secular Pro-Life. I think I've been recording commercials for Secular Pro-Life for years, and I knew Kelsey a little bit, but I didn't know any of the other bloggers very well. And then we were all in San Francisco for the Students for Life West Coast Conference a few months ago, and you guys had a booth. And then I spoke, and then you guys filmed it, and you had a way better camera angle than I did. So you gave me your footage. We used that for the video, and we talked, and we hung out. We became great friends. And then ever since, especially not so much Ellen and me, but Monica, we've been, I don't know what's up with Ellen, but Monica and me have been, we do Google Hangouts and Skype, and we'll proof each other's blog posts. We're, engaging kind of ideas and philosophy, and we just kind of became sounding boards for each other, which was really cool. So then you guys decided to come to our Justice for All seminar, which was awesome. And then Monica wrote 2 blog posts since then, and it's been really cool. And I just thought it could be a good opportunity to talk a little bit about your experiences with JFA, but also your experiences as people who are not religious at a religious seminar and kind of a religious outreach, and you're just kind of, and hopefully in the end, ultimately make this more general, not just what this seminar was like, but in general, how can the pro-life movement do a better job in welcoming in pro-life atheists, pro-life agnostics, or people who are not Protestant or Catholic, which are kind of the Catholic, if you're pro-life, you're going to be either Protestant or Catholic is kind of this norm. And you both have done a lot of thinking on how pro-life people could do that better. So why don't we begin could you just tell me a little bit about what your experience generally, not as atheists, but just generally, what was your experience like at the seminar and the outreach?
I thought it was fantastic. Not speaking generally, I think that the content is great. The substance of the arguments that JFA presents are very good. Ellen and I have spent a lot of time debating abortion over the last couple of years, and we have our own opinions about better and worse pro-choice arguments, better and worse pro-life arguments, and JFA and the kinds of ideas you were presenting were, I thought, very solid. And then you also focused a lot on how to present those ideas, not just what the good ideas are, but how to present them, which I think makes a huge difference. I'm all for the approach that you guys use. It was very, very refreshing to see you focus so much on how to treat people when you're having these conversations, especially people from particularly sensitive categories of people, post-abortive people, people worried about rape. Those things are even more emotional than abortion in general, which is already pretty emotional. And I was very glad to see it taken so seriously, and see the other side taken seriously, and see the debate taken seriously, or maybe you could call it a conversation. But I thought it was great. I thought that you gave us a lot of great things to think about and move forward with.
Yeah. I would say something really similar, having discussed this a lot online, and you mostly just get into debates with people, and I've never been to a seminar like that, so it was really enlightening to come at it from a completely different perspective of, we want to understand their perspective, and we want to talk to them about it, and not just be as confrontational. And, I don't know, maybe because it was my first time doing that, it was easy to learn. So, I don't know, I really love the group sessions where we got to practice.
You guys were so good, too. I was selfish, and I put both Monica and Ellen in my mentor group just because I have the power, and so I did that. And because I was kind of curious. I want to see, because you do so much online debate, or almost exclusively online debate, which is so different from face-to-face. I want to see, okay, what would this be like? And you guys were so good. I mean, other people that were kind of helping facilitate the logistics of the seminar were sitting in the back watching our group because we were the closest to them. And they're like, your group is so good. How do they get so good? It's like, well, they talk about this all the time.
We like to debate, independent of the abortion debate, which is obviously our thing. We are both the kind of people who who like to have arguments, especially if they're not heated fights, but challenging intellectually. And I know Ellen has experienced this before, more often than me even, where online sometimes we'll see other pro-lifers without meaning to necessarily straw man pro-choice perspectives, and we'll try to clarify, actually, I think what they're saying is this. And there have been multiple times when people have thought that Ellen was pro-choice just because she was trying to explain what the pro-choicer was saying.
This is why I really appreciate the JFA approach of, we need to learn how to talk about this better,
Yeah, it's nice to know that there are other pro-lifers who want to understand what the other side is saying, so that we can so that we can communicate with them at all.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate what you said about us taking things like rape and post-abortive people seriously, but I know we're not the only ones. I mean, and I know you said that before in San Francisco, but I mean, I think one of the things that impressed me most about secular pro-life from the very beginning was here was a group of these young, mainly college students, who are taking philosophy really seriously. You guys were taking especially the rape issue really, really seriously, and that was even affecting the way you guys thought about bodily rights arguments and other things. And I think some pro-life people saw that and were like, oh man, this is kind of scary with some of the conclusions that are for some of the people. But I'm like, no, this is kind of awesome. They're actually understanding bodily rights arguments really well and understanding how to take to apply that in a consistent way. I actually really appreciate that, even if we don't always come to the same conclusions on rape abortions. And so I think it was kind of cool to be able to come together and say, okay, let's take a look at this really seriously. Let's take this seriously together and figure out how to talk to people. Talk about the outreach. What was the outreach experience like for you? We went to Fresno City College and tried to talk to people. What was that like for you guys?
I tried to observe at first because, again, it was my first time doing any sort of outreach. But what I found interesting is that you have no idea who you're going to talk to.
It's total roulette wheel. You have no idea.
Yeah, you just have no idea. And so that's why it's so important to ask questions. And I just found you might think someone you're talking to is pro-life because they say, I think it's a human being fertilization and abortion is wrong, but you don't know how they feel about the legality of it. And then there's all sorts of other, issues that came up with in my conversations that I was really surprised by. And then, I don't know, it's just different people have thought about different things to different extents. And it's so easy to box people into the stereotype. And when you find that that's wrong, once you're able to talk to her face to face, you find, okay, that's completely wrong.
Well, not just that. I think it's easier online to get harsh because you have the anonymity of the internet and you don't see the face. But the flip side is online, I think it's also easier to delve deeper into the debate because people will give you all sorts of sources and you can go look into it and come back to them with a really thought out rebuttal. And you get so used to that. You get so used to mostly conversing with people who, first of all, want to argue about it because they usually seek us out. And secondly, they usually have thought about it relatively in depth. And then when you're on a college campus with people who don't even know you're going to be there, you could get any. I was
never talked about it.
Yeah, I was surprised some of the people asked about it, and I would ask what I consider a very basic question, like, for example, what do you think should be the legal status of abortion? And people would say, I've never thought about that. And in my mind, I'm thinking, how is that possible? Right. I think about that every day. Not everybody does, I guess. So that was really interesting to try to imagine what it's like to not be steeped in this debate all the time.
Yeah.
Well, Alan did pretty awesome. I wrote a blog post, and we're not going to tell the whole story because I don't think we have time because there's so many other things I want to cover. But Alan had this great moment where I was engaged with a biology professor, and he was really kind of mean and assumed a lot of kind of very negative things about us. And he didn't disagree with any of our biology at all. He was like, "Oh yeah, it's totally accurate, second grade stuff." But he did not like our approach or our dialogue tools. He thought they were deceptive and had just a lot of ideas about where we were coming from. And I spent like an hour with him, but he did most of the talking. We didn't get real far. But so I wrote that down. If you want to read that, you can read the blog post. But there's this moment where he accused us all of being like, he went to this rant about how we were all paternalistic and we're all like right-wing conservative religious nut jobs. And I had this decision in front of me because there's some disagreement among like pro-life apologists. What do you do when an ad hominem thing comes up? Some people say, don't try to defend yourself. Just say, so what? It doesn't matter. Even if that's true, it doesn't matter. You kind of make that point. And I think sometimes I think that's the best thing, but I just felt like, man, he's not letting me talk a whole lot. Maybe I can faster show him what's going on. And Alan just happened to be right there, 2 feet away. It was, or maybe more than that, but 6 feet away. And I just, Alan, why don't you come into the conversation and tell me, what do you think of Howard's view that we're all a bunch of religious fundamentalist nut jobs? And what did you say?
Well, I was trying to be gentle about it again.
You were really nice. You were very soft-spoken,
Yeah, because not how I come across online sometimes, but I was like, okay, well, there's a lot of pro-lifers that are religious and conservative, but, they're not all like that. I mean, I'm a pro-life atheist, and I have other pro-life atheist friends who are very, very liberal on all sorts of other issues, but just happen to be pro-life. So it's wrong to say a religiously based position.
Right. And Monica was like 30 feet away. So, see the girl with the curly hair over there? Okay, now C is an agnostic, and C's pro-life, and so he kind of like he had this concern in his face, like maybe I'm way wrong, but he didn't give up. He pointed at Alan and like yelled at her. He said, "You're an anecdote," and Alan said,
"I was like, no, I'm a person."
That personhood thing again.
He did kind of back down at first. He was like, well, maybe I'm wrong about that. But then it was like he was caught off guard, but then he like came back to it later. I noticed he did that over and over and over again. Like in the moment he will concede, but then he'll just come back to the same exact point that he had before, which is why I was like, no, I'm a person and I do have a perspective, and you can't just, hand wave me away like my reasons don't matter. But that's why I let you take care of it. I ended up walking away eventually.
I think you're right. It was like we hit deceptive stuff, and then went to bodily rights, and then he went back to deceptive outreach tools, and then he went back to bodily rights later. And it was cyclical. It was interesting, but it was just, man, it's like I need to have secular pro-life come to every single outreach I ever do, just so I can point at people, there's pro-life people from every religion.
It's sad because, you should be able to just say that. Well, actually, I know this group secular platform, but it doesn't have the same effect as someone being there in person.
You shouldn't even have to say it at all unless they actually show where in your arguments you've relied on religion.
Yeah.
It's not a religious argument.
I know.
We've had so many people come to us, and say that they use basically the same kinds of arguments we do. Not always, but mostly. As soon as someone finds out that they're Christian, they dismiss them. And I had a woman ask me during the outreach what I would recommend when that happens. And I think that there's two possibilities. There's a possibility that the person doesn't want to engage in the argument, and so there really is just an ad hominem to change the subject. And in that case, I don't know how much you can really do. But I do think there are a lot of people, they're not trying to commit a logical fallacy. They actually are trying to express that they think that you are coming from such a different worldview than them, that you're not going to have a shared basis of understanding. Maybe they're just not articulating that very well. In that case, I think that you can try to walk them through it and say, well, can you show me where I've used premises you disagree with and why and so forth, and maybe think a little bit more about it. So it really depends on why they're saying it. It's pretty frustrating either way.
I completely agree. Tell me about, okay, so let's bring in the secular pro-life kind of angle on this. You were at a somewhat religious seminar, and you're not religious. And a lot of people would feel uncomfortable about that. And so I think I just wanted to tell me about your experience at the seminar and the outreach as atheists. But then I also want to go broader than just what this weekend was. I don't want this just to be a love fest between like, oh, we love each other. Whatever. I want the general pro-life movement to hear kind of from the pro-life atheist community how maybe they could be a little bit more welcoming.
Well, it helps. First of all, I already knew you. We're friends. So when you told me about the seminar, it was coming from someone who already knows that I'm secular and knows that seminar is religious and still thinks it'll be a good fit, which makes some difference.
Yeah.
Secondly, you told us ahead of time that it was going to have some religious aspects, and the emails that they sent out were very upfront about that. So we knew ahead of time, and we could sort of, you don't really prepare for it, there's nothing to prepare, but
buckle down, yeah.
We were ready for that to be the case.
We were ready for religion.
We were ready for religion to happen. And that makes a difference right off the bat if you expect it, which isn't always the case. And so then,
even more importantly, I think, is how the seminar actually went and the things that people did and said, you know, like acknowledging that there are non-Christians in the group, you know.
Yes. Well, Josh, you set the tone right away because you welcomed not just us, different kinds of groups of people, but you made it clear from the beginning that there were other kinds of people there, which I think helps everyone else there just be aware. I think in my experience, most of the times when I felt the most alienated or frustrated, it was not on purpose by other people. It was just that it didn't cross their mind that there would be other types of people there, or if there were, how it would feel for them. Because why would it? They're used to being with people who mostly believe the same things religiously that they do, and so they just operate in that way. In fact, after the seminar, one of the other attendees has since contacted me online and said that there were many things that happened during the seminar that he probably wouldn't have given a second thought. But once he knew we were there, he started thinking about it from our point of view.
That's interesting.
So nice.
Refreshing.
So refreshing. And so there wasn't a lot of religion during the seminar anyway.
Yeah,
it was mostly,
there wasn't.
But even when there was, you handled it in a way to sort of acknowledge this is happening. It doesn't mean we think everyone here is religious. It doesn't mean we wish that you were or that you would leave or anything like that. It's just
like, I don't mind when people are praying as long as there's not like this pressure to also pretend to pray.
Right.
And all it really requires, you know, is just acknowledging that we're there. That's it. You know, that makes the biggest difference.
It really does. There's a huge difference between pray with me if you follow Christ versus, all right, let's pray.
Right. And you're like, what do I do now?
Yeah, if I don't, it's a conflict because on the one hand, you don't want to seem flippant by sitting there just watching everyone pray, but on the other hand, I don't like bowing my head and closing my eyes because I feel like I'm pretending to pray and I'm not praying. I'm just sitting there. Yeah. They seemed perfectly fine with it, so that was another thing. So it wasn't just the prayer, which you guys only prayed, twice, maybe 3 times in the whole day, which isn't that much.
Yeah.
The other thing was, even though people knew that we are secularists, nobody all day came up to us and tried to talk to us about why we're wrong.
Yeah.
And it's not that we can't handle people thinking we're wrong. We know you think we're wrong. We understand that.
Unnecessarily divisive. You know?
It is, and it's not why we're there. There are contexts in which it can be very interesting and even helpful to have conversations about what we think about religion and faith, but usually pro-life work is not that context. I mean, so for example, Josh, you and I have had already multiple conversations about the different things we think about religion and faith and morality, and I enjoy those conversations because, first of all, they're voluntary, and second of all, they happen in the context of us being friends and curious about what the other person thinks, and I never feel like you're trying to get me to agree with you. There isn't that aggression there.
Yeah.
That's fine. I enjoy that. I like having that conversation in that context. But when you have just met somebody, when you've just met a large group of people, because most of the time there's just a handful of us and a whole bunch of Christian pro-lifers.
Right.
And
then it feels like you're more of a project than a person. And that's, I try not to be like that with pro-life work. You know, it's hard because you want to talk about this issue. And it would be great if people converted, you know, but you don't want them to think that you're thinking they're a project, because they're not. They're a person, you know.
Right.
So let me ask you a couple of follow-up questions on this part, because I remember even when you first started writing about this idea, this was the only thing that I had to like work at trying to figure. Okay, what do I think about this? Like all the other stuff. Like obviously we should strengthen the voices of pro-life minorities. Obviously we should talk about diversity and use inclusive language and blah. Like all of that is like so clear. But then there's the part about don't evangelize, and I started thinking about that. I was like, okay, now for the Christian perspective, you know, like what do I think about this? And so I want to get your take. I want to learn a little bit more, because And you've probably already heard the quote or seen the video, but there's an amazing Penn Jillette video where he talks about evangelism, and I blogged about this a long time ago. He retweeted it, whatever. So I want to read you this quote because I want to know if there's any disagreement between you and Penn on this. They've made a rule at their magic show. They shake every single person's hand that wants to come up. So they actually spend more time doing that than the magic show. So it was after that, some guy shows like in the line, gives them a Bible with a note in it, says, I love your work, and I really hope you become a Christian one day, or whatever he said. I don't know what he said. So this is just a paragraph of what Penn said about that, like the day after. He's like emotional talking about it, and then I want to know what you think. He said, I've always said that I don't respect people who don't proselytize. I don't respect that at all. If you believe that there's a heaven and a hell, and people could be going to hell or not getting eternal life, and you think that it's not really worth telling them this because it would make it socially awkward, and atheists who think people shouldn't proselytize and who say just leave me alone and keep your religion to yourself, how much do you have to hate somebody to not proselytize? How much do you have to hate somebody to believe everlasting life is possible and not tell them that? He said, I mean, if I believed beyond the shadow of a doubt that a truck was coming at you and you didn't believe that truck was bearing down on you, there's a certain point where I tackle you. And this is more important than that. So is there any disagreement you have with that? Or just how would you maybe just clarify more what you mean when you tell pro-lifers not to evangelize?
I definitely would like to clarify that, because first of all, we are not saying never evangelize with people that disagree with you in the entire time you know them. We are saying when you have just met somebody who is meeting up with you and coming together with you to do pro-life work, it's not the time and place to start with that. Secondly, there's an analogy I want to use that I think might be helpful to you. It's sort of like the way you train people to talk to pro-choicers or people who are ambivalent about abortion. We believe abortion is a very serious problem. We acknowledge that human beings are being killed every day in this process. It's very dire. And yet it is not effective or helpful to jump down people's throats, basically, and come up to them. Even if your intentions are good, you don't go up to someone and say, this is what's happening, these are all the people who are being killed, and you have to do something.
Well,
it's not,
some do, but they're not terribly effective, maybe.
It's alienating. It's not effective. And I can say that Ellen and I, we work with a lot of religious pro-lifers, and so we're sort of used to it, and even we feel frustrated sometimes. We know lots of non-religious pro-lifers who we can't even get to come out or come around at all because they are so exhausted. And another thing too, while I'm on the subject, is I think religious pro-lifers should keep in mind that a lot of some secularists become secular because they thought more about it in a different way and they decided, you know what, this doesn't make sense, I'm not going with this. But there are some people who used to be religious and they become secular through a very painful process, through some kind of problem they had with the church or with religious people. It can be very raw and very difficult for some people and emotionally painful. It's not just an academic discussion. And so if they think that the only way they can do work in the pro-life movement is to have to keep revisiting these things, they're not going to come around.
Yeah, so like this is a confusing topic for me because I do understand the need to evangelize, and if you do care about someone, you of course don't want them to go to hell, and you should care about everybody. But I think it's a question of what's going to be most effective, and the way people approach this with strangers is usually not very effective. So it's a question of A, what your goals are, and B, what's going to be most effective. So, you know, in the pro-life movement, our main goal is to prevent abortion, and that's, like Monica said, that's a dire, dire need, but we're not running around screaming at people because that would never work, you know? So it's about what's going to work. And as Monica said, there's a lot of different backgrounds, and if you just approach people in an aggressive manner or treating them like a project, then they're going to back away from you even more, and they're going to get this image of Christians that is going to be very hard to remove later on.
So really, you should take exactly the lessons that JFA teaches in terms of abortion apologetics and apply them. You should make sure you understand where people are coming from. Don't assume that because someone says they're an atheist, it means what you think it means.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot more variety than people realize. Make sure you ask questions and listen. If They want to talk about it. I mean, even on a college campus, if you come across someone who very clearly does not want to have this conversation, you don't push it, right? You give them the opportunity, you might ask them some questions, but you don't chase them down. And it's the same thing with this. And then, I've never really thought about it this way, but then I guess you try to find common ground, but that could be tricky, I think. I don't know.
So we've got 2 minutes left. I want to hear from you, like in 30 seconds, besides what we've already covered, what would be your number one tip for pro-life Christians who really want to do a good job welcoming pro-life atheists into the movement? What is one more thing that we haven't talked about that we could do better?
I think we actually didn't talk about trying to put together religiously diverse seminars. JFA was great. It's Christian-based. I respect that. But a lot of times religious pro-lifers wonder why there isn't more secular involvement. I think they overestimate how many of us there are and how easy it is for us to find each other. So we're in this awkward position where we actually kind of rely on the sort of Christian infrastructure of the pro-life movement to help us be able to do anything useful.
Yeah.
So if more Christians were willing to help us take a lead on being more religiously diverse, that would be great, even though I understand that maybe they aren't interested in that.
Put together a seminar and I'll be there.
Yeah.
Final thoughts from you, Ellen.
I don't know. I feel like we've covered most of it. Just definitely organizing something, maybe putting together reading material that's completely secular to reach out to everybody, just so they can be more familiar with the secular arguments against abortion, and then there's more common ground there.
Monica and Ellen blog and work with Secular Pro-Life. You can check out their website, and you should check out their website at secularprolife.org. They've got an active blog, and I really enjoy it. It's one of the main pro-life blogs that I follow and read just about every time something comes out. There's a lot of really good material and big discussions under the blog post, too. A lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds commenting, as they should, as you would expect, at a Secular Pro-Life blog. If you want to comment on this episode or read any related links, I'm going to post links to the blog post that Monica wrote about her experience at the JFA Seminar, as well as that conversation Ellen and I had with a biology professor. I'll post that in the links. You can find it at prolifepodcast.net/195 for episode 195. And remember, you can always make a great impact in any conversation if you remember to ask good questions, listen to understand, and find genuine common ground when possible. That's our show. Have a great week. Now go talk to someone.
You've been watching Life Report, Pro-Life Talk, Real World Answers. Life Report is produced by Right to Life of Central California. Visit their website at fresnoprolife.org.